I'm gonna keep doing this. I need to get more comfortable in front of the camera. Hi, it's Kay, welcome back. I figured I should just wrap up all of the books that I've read this month because some of the books that I read aren't in videos, so I just wanted to share my thoughts and opinions on those, and I won't go too much into detail on the things that I've already shared in videos. Then I want to talk about the books I'm going to be reading next month. 3 of them will be in a video, and the other 2 I don't believe I'm going to put into a video outside of my wrap up, but they're just the books that I know that I'm going to be reading next month, and yeah, so I wanted to share that. So let's go ahead and get started. My wrap up. So the first 3 books are going to be from one of the videos that I posted: The Coven, The Promise, and Bow Before the Elf Queen. The Coven, when I read that, I thought it was absolutely fantastic, and I raved about it. I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, and that's what I did. Having time to reflect on what I thought about that book, I will say that now, on the 28th of July, I definitely don't think it's as good as I thought that it was. I would say it's probably like a 3-star read. I've come to realize now that I've like died down from the hype and I'm not as attached to the characters, I've realized that it's marketed as a romance, and it's one of those books that says it's a romance, but then it's not. Like, it's just smut after smut after smut, and honestly got to the point where I was genuinely skipping the smut scenes in this book. By the time I was about like 70% in, I think I skipped every smut scene. If that's not telling of what I thought of that, then I don't know what is. So maybe I was just super invested in like the characters and what the plot outside of that was when I first read it. But now that I've had time to like sit down and think about it, the plot was definitely secondary to writing the smut scene. So I'm still going to be reading the second book that's coming out in August, but I definitely do not think of it as highly as I originally thought of it, and hopefully that allows me to go into the second book, which I think is called The Cursed, without having any bias, I guess you could say, because now that I've had time to like sit on it, I'm not thinking as highly of it, so I'll have less bias going into the second book, which I'm excited about. The second book was The Promise. My opinion on that hasn't changed. It was terrible. I'm not gonna say more than that, but The Promise by Katrina Gray, I think it was, is not for me. So moving right along, Bow Before the Elf Queen by, I don't remember the name. I forgot to put the authors on this list, but it's right here, so it's fine. You'll see the author on the cover. Still not good. My thoughts on it haven't changed. Wasn't bad, wasn't good. Read it before. I've read it better and I've read it worse. So it was what it was. Now, what I didn't talk about in the video where I talked about those 3 books was I ended up reading the second book in the Bow Before the Elf Queen series. I think there's 3 of them, and I read 2. The third one isn't out yet, maybe. Again, I do this thing where I get very attached to the characters of a book, and I don't necessarily, it doesn't need to be written perfectly or very well. Like, I don't need to hold it in like a 4 or 5-star read category for me to be willing to read the next book. If I am even slightly invested in the characters, I want to know. I'm a curious person at heart, and so I'll read the next book, which I probably should stop doing because the second book was just as bad as the first. That's all I really have to say about it. It didn't add anything new to the story, really. It didn't take anything away from the story. It was just okay. And again, it's been written before, it'll be written again. So yeah, I apologize that I don't have more to say about that, but my opinions on the second book and the first book are very much the same, and I've already spoken at length about the first book in my last video that I will, if I know how to. I'll see if I can figure it out. I'll have like tagged up on the top right now. Ruthless Heart by Roxy Sloan was not good. It was bad. It was very annoying in the sense that it's one of those books where if they just had a conversation, things would not have happened the way that they did. He was upset with her about the past, because this is kind of a second chance mafia romance, is I guess what it would fall under. And he's upset with her about something that happened in the past, and if they just talked about it, it'd be fine. But they don't talk about it. And so they have issues for the start of the book. And then something happens later on in the book, and instead of talking to him about it, she doesn't. And then when that blows up in her face as the third act conflict, it's like, wow, if only you guys had sat down and had a single conversation in this entire book where you're supposed to be falling back in love. It just didn't make sense. It didn't do anything. So the 6th book that I read this month was actually the sequel to Ruthless Heart, and it's called Ruthless Games, also by Roxy Sloan. It was almost copy paste the same book. Like the third act conflict was the same, except he wasn't angry at her. I guess he was still angry at her from the last book in the 2nd book. So now he's angry at her for a new reason, but he's angry at her and they aren't talking. And so they don't like figure things out. And it was pointless. These books could have been one book and half of the page length. They weren't super long. They were only like, I think the first one was 200, the second one's 200. And then I did read the 3rd book. That's the 7th book that I read this month. Also about 200 pages. So they were all very short. They all probably could have been halved and put into one book at 300 pages, and it would have been, I assume, a decent story. I don't know. It's the first mafia romance I've ever read, and it will probably be the last mafia romance that I ever read, because it just wasn't for me. It's exhausting when the conflicts in the book are just lack of communication, because I guess I just can't relate to it. Dylan and I have amazing communication, always have, always will. Knock on something. And so I just can't relate to not sitting down and having a conversation about something that could cause an issue in your relationship. But maybe that's something that people can relate to, and that's why it does so well, because it seems to happen a lot in books. But I'm over it. It's played out. I'd like something new done now. And so the 7th book that I read was, as I said, the 3rd book in that series, Ruthless Vow. This one was kind of better, I guess. It was still just a lack of communication and the hero trying to flex really hard. In this one, he wasn't upset with her, it didn't seem at any point. At least not that I'm remembering, which was a nice change of pace, but it was still like, just talk to each other. Sit down and have a heart-to-heart. It's all that you need. And they don't, and they never do. And I don't think that they ever will, based off the end of this book. It doesn't seem like that's ever going to change in their lives. But it's over, it's done with. I read all 3 of them. I guess I can say I'm proud of that. I don't know if I am. So the 8th book that I read this month was God of Malice by Rena Kent. Was the first dark romance that I've ever read before. I've read like dark fantasy before, maybe not true dark fantasy because it wasn't anything like this, but I also don't think that God of Malice is true dark romance either. It kind of felt like it was a parody of dark romance, and I say that because the opening scene of this book is pretty dark. It's definitely read the trigger warnings if you're going to pick this book up. But outside of that, it didn't really feel like any elements of it were truly dark. Like it felt like there were like some kinks in there that were being played into as like a dark romance. And maybe I just don't know what a dark romance actually is, but I tried to read, is it Haunting Adeline? Whatever. After this, and I didn't like it and I stopped reading it, but I could read this book. So I just don't think that it is a dark romance. But I was genuinely curious the entire time that I was reading it, which is why I finished it all the way. And it was okay. Like, I didn't mind it. It definitely was not something I'll pick up again. Like, I don't think, it seems like based off of the reviews that I've read that Lena Kent writes all of her dark romances in a similar way. And so I don't think that I'll be picking up any more of her books because it wasn't for me at the end of the day. But it wasn't terrible. It seemed very showy, I guess is a good way to say it. Like, it wanted to put off dark romance. It wanted to fall into the category of dark romance. And so it was like, oh, these are the things that I need to hit. And so it like made a point to hit all of those, but it didn't feel like it was like at its core and at its essence that it was a dark romance. How many times did I say dark romance in that? Oh my gosh. I'll probably make that a game. Anyways. And so the final book that I read, I think it's number 8. So the final book that I read, book number 8, was The Silent Patient by Alex. I'm not even gonna try and say his last name because it will be incorrect. But so that's the last book that I read this month. I actually finished it yesterday, and it's the first psychological thriller that I have ever read. I guess some people would say it's the second, because the first psychological thriller that I ever read was Verity by Colleen Hoover, but I personally just think that book's a joke. So not a hot take, but I don't like Colleen Hoover, and that is the only book of hers that I've finished. I've started one other book of hers. I started November 9, like way back in the day when it was like, I don't even know what it was on. I saw an ad for it on like Facebook when it was like first being published, and you could like read chapter by chapter, and it was like interactive. And I was in high school, and I did it. Oh, I started to. I read like the first 2 chapters, and then I went and bought the book at Barnes & Noble, and then I read one more chapter, and I never picked it up again because it wasn't good. I didn't like it. I'm not a fan of hers, and I don't think I ever will be a fan of hers. And so the first book of hers that I finished was Verity, and I wouldn't call it an actual psychological thriller. I would call it a joke. So moving right along, I read The Silent Patient, and it's the first true psychological thriller that I've ever read, and it was so good. Alex M, is what I'm gonna call him. He knows how to write a page-turning book. I read it like almost continuously. I was turning the pages so quickly. I had such a great time. And the twist at the end of the book was not at all what I expected to happen, and I was pleasantly surprised by it. I was reading it last night actually, and I was next to Dylan, I'm reading, and I went, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. And he was like, what? And I was like, well, you see. And then I explained what the book was about and what ended up happening to him, because he doesn't read, and not a chance he would ever read it. And he was like, sounds dumb, and went back to what he was doing, because that's how he responds to all of the books that I read. But yeah, so those are the thoughts that I had on the 8 books that I read this month. 8. 9 books that I read this month. I did indeed just count, and I was off by 1. Oops, my bad. But those 9 books were the ones that I have finished. I've started a few, but I haven't finished them, so I'm not gonna be talking about them in this video, but they were really good. And well, some of them were really good, and some of them were not so good. Now, for my August TBR, I have 5 books that I'm going to be sharing with you. 3 of them I've kind of talked about in my haul video, and they're going to be in videos. The first one being One Italian Summer by Rebecca Soule. And I've already explained what this book is about in the haul video that I did, that I'll link on the top if I can figure out how to do that. The second one being The Summer House by Lauren K. Denton. Sorry, her name is covered, so I had to look on the spine to get it. And the last book being Things You Save in a Fire by Catherine Center. So these three books I'm actually planning to do a 24-hour readathon, and in those I want to read these. So that's my plan for these ones. And then for the other two books that I'm going to be reading, a little preface. I actually read The Silent Patient for a small book club that I'm doing with my brother's fiance. And so we're actually gonna meet up and discuss that in a few days. So I'm really excited to do that because that's when I can get all spoilery because she's also read it. And then, so in August, for that book club, we're going to be reading Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. I've already read it. I already have thoughts, but I was explaining what it is about to her. So editing K here, and I forgot to say what this book is even about. So Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas is actually about a girl who ends up dating her ex-boyfriend's father. And so basically the book follows how they end up in a relationship, how they struggle with getting together, and it's just a very taboo book to read for two reasons. One being that she's getting with her ex-boyfriend's father, and the second reason being that her ex-boyfriend's father is clearly older than her. He's like 36 and she's 19, I think. But it's a pretty taboo book. That's not for everyone. And she was like, oh my God, that sounds amazing, but we can't do it till August. And I was like, oh, okay. She was like, yeah, I don't read a lot, so I'm reading The Silent Patient right now. And I was like, oh my gosh, we could start now and I could read it. And so that's how I ended up reading The Silent Patient. So I'm excited to read Birthday Girl with her and get her thoughts on it, because I mean, I obviously haven't shared my thoughts on it before because this is a new channel, but I've told my mom about it. I've told Dylan about it. I've told some of my friends about it, and they were all like, whoa, you read taboo books, girl, and just like left me alone. But so it'll be nice to like be able to interact with someone that has read it, because the only other times that I've heard people talk about it is when I've heard like Chandler Ainsley talk about it, because I am obsessed with her channel. I'll link it in the description down below, because it's like the only person that I watch on YouTube at this point. And then, so it's nice to be able to interact with someone who has read it and not just be watching a video on it or having my own thoughts on it. And then, so the last book I'm going to read is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. I'm sorry if that was wrong. I am reading that for a video that I'm planning to do. I was supposed to read it in high school, and I am one of those people that once you tell me to do something, I don't want to do it. And so I actually never read any of the books for high school or college, which is crazy because I'm an English minor, but I've like never read any of the books for school. So I'm thinking about going back and reading all of them, because they typically have you read books for a reason, and I want to see what that reason was now that no one's forcing me to do it. Maybe I just need to reevaluate myself. Anyways, so that's all that I've got for you guys today, but thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, feel free to give it a like, and y'all should tell me in the comment section down below if you also have the weird take of not reading books for English classes. But yeah, until next time, bye y'all.